We're now moving is eligible for up to $4 million in ventilation and also entitled up to approximately $1 million for phase one plumbing. So at this time, in order to proceed with the application process, we are asking for the board to adopt the resolutions.
Thank you so much for the presentation and the good news. On that note, if there's any no questions, I'll call for a motion. I move forward to approve resolutions 23-041, 23-043, 23-044, 23-045. May I have a second? Oh, and regarding the CalShape Phase 2, may I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll call for the vote.
Liker,
Yes.
Lopez Aguino,
Yes.
Medina,
Yes.
Quinones.
Yes,
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you.
very good. At this time, I'd like to open with a statement. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to the Superintendent's Advisory Committee for all the work that has gone into the facility asthma management study. Thank you for your time and effort in searching for solutions to mitigate the impact of declining enrollment in South Bay. Additionally, thank you to the students, staff, parents, and community for your patience and your feedback. We fully understand the anxiety associated with school consolidations. We will continue to be collaborative and transparent as we search for viable options and solutions. Please note that public comments will begin at the conclusion of the presentation. If you wish to speak, blue cards are available in the back table of the room. You may submit your completed blue cards to the board secretary, Ms. Coomer. Thank you, Ms. Cooper. At this time, I'd like to recognize, and the board would like to recognize Superintendent Jose Espinoza. Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you, President Quinones. And I would like to also thank the committee that worked to come up with some recommendations. The community who showed up to the town halls and gave us a lot of input. This is a really difficult decision, as everybody is aware. And our goal is to be as transparent as possible, to get as much input as we can from the community. And obviously, we have an understanding that however the board chooses to go forward, someone's not going to be happy, right? This is not easy work. This is work that's going on across the state and in other states as well. So we really appreciate all the effort and all the input that everybody's is putting into this process. And then I would clarify that tonight is a board study session. So we're going to go over the presentation that we're going to go over. Many people who have attended the town halls have already had the opportunity to look at this information. And I know that the board was also there, but now this is the time where the board has presented all the information. And then the board will get a chance to ask some questions. And then at the end, we will be asking the board for some direction. So just wanted to clarify that part of the process. Let's go to the next one. All right, and then just to make sure that I know that there was a lot of concern from different members of our community that these decisions had already been made. Clearly tonight, after the presentation, I hope that the community understands that decisions have not been made yet. The board makes those decisions, and this is part of that. This is part of that process. So I just wanted to make sure to clarify that at this point, decisions have not been made. And even tonight, once the board gives us some direction, then our staff is going to start to formulate a clearer plan that then the board will vote on at some point. All right, I said that at the end of the meeting, at the end of the presentation, or basically at the end of the meeting, we're going to ask for the board to give us some direction. And so here's basically what we're going to ask. So I asked that the board listen to the presentation with these things in mind. Number one, we can proceed with all of the Superintendent Advisory Committee's options. We can proceed with the central option only. We can proceed with the Nestor Mendoza distributed option only. We can proceed with Nestor Mendoza swap. And then I will be presenting a concept with some specific examples that the board can also consider as we move forward. So the board can choose that. Consider all options, including the new concept we're presenting tonight, or proceed with central and the superintendent's rebuilding concept. So those are all the items that that the board can consider, and we're going to be asking for direction at the end. So as you're listening to the presentation today, think about this page. Maybe you want to tear it out, put it over on the side, because that is what we're going to be asking for direction on. All right, we have been talking about, for a couple of years now, this idea that, in systems, in highly effective systems, that system is always reflecting on however they're doing their work, how they're meeting whatever goals that they have, and consistently they're redefining those based on how it's going, right? If our goal is to ensure that students are reading at grade level by third grade, we should continue to reflect on that and then ask at some point, so how is that going? If it's going well, then we keep going. If it's not going so well, then we need to redefine what we're doing until we get to a point where we are able to rebuild a highly successful, in our case, school district. And so this idea we have been applying throughout our district for the last couple of years. And that is basically how we got to where we're at today, based on this idea. We quickly were able to identify that declining enrollment was perhaps one of the biggest challenges that we were facing in our school district. And therefore, we started to reflect. We came up with the process on how to do that. And then, we started to redefine what success is in our school district. And if in the next couple of years, we're going to rebuild whatever we think that might be. And that's going to be defined throughout this process. So that is how we got here today. Another example of that idea is our newly adopted mission, vision, and values. And although everybody can see the mission, vision, and values on the overhead there, I'd like to highlight that throughout our mission, vision, and values, the community and engaging the community is throughout each one of those. And so that's an important part for our district and our school board. And we want to just highlight that as we go forward in this process, the community voice and community input should also be evident. All right, the agenda for tonight, I've gotten already to my comments. We're going to talk about the purpose, the process, the communication strategy we've had, the superintendent's advisory committee. We're going to go over some enrollment data, potential solutions that may be out there, and then we are going to ask for some direction. Right at the end, right? So we'll look at all of that. And before, I'm sorry, I forgot one thing. I think everybody noticed when I came in, there were people that were looking at the input cards that are pasted around the room. And those reflect the input that was given by the community at each of the town hall meetings. So at any point, I just want to make sure that anybody that would like to see those is welcome to do that or to read those. All right, let's continue going. Skip this one. We've already done that.
I'm gonna start here.
Yep.
Before we go, okay. Good evening, Board of Trustees, community, those in attendance. As Superintendent Espinosa just said, we have a full agenda this evening, and he already started with his comments. And the rest of the time, we'll focus on the process that the Superintendent's Advisory Committee went through for approximately we're about 8 months in. And that process, we contracted with an experienced consulting firm, MGT Consulting, who has gone through school consolidation, the process with other districts. So we made sure to contract with someone who had that experience, who was able to guide us and facilitate that process for us. And here today is Michael Taylor from MGT Consulting, and he's going to now, I'm going to pass it on to him, who's going to talk about that process from beginning to now here today.
Thank you, Mr. Lara. Good evening, President Quinones, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Espinoza. As you can see from the agenda, the distance is long and the time is short. So I will do my best to move as swiftly as I can through these slides. But the intent here is to provide you with as much information as possible and not to saturate you with too much information. We started with about 300 slides and we were able to get it down to about 71. And so 20 of those slides, or those 71 slides, are transition slides. So we have about 50 slides with really good content to give you a lot of information about the process that we've gone through over the last 8 months as it relates to the facility asset management study. So purpose, why are we doing this? And you've heard me say this before, declining enrollment is very real. And so with declining enrollment over a number of years, going all the way back to 11-12, the district has lost a lot of students. And so the question is, what can the district do to better and more efficiently manage its facilities? As you can imagine, a facility with capacity of 800 that is now at 400 has excess capacity of quite a few seats. So what is the best way to manage those kinds of facilities as an example? And so in order to determine the road ahead, the superintendent established an advisory committee to get together, to look at data, and to have a robust conversation on what's possible as far as the efficient management of the district's facilities. At the very bottom, you see the reasons for declining enrollment. And we get this question a lot. Well, why are we experiencing declining enrollment? So the state of California has experienced a significant population decline over the last, say, 10, 15 years. And that's projected to continue, even though the data seems to be a little bit more positive from the last data that I was able to look at. But population in the state of California is declining. People are moving to Nevada, they're moving to Arizona, they're moving to Texas, and also to other states. Businesses are leaving the state of California for any number of reasons, tax purposes, better business conditions in other states, declining birth rates. Young people are waiting longer, and in some cases not having kids. So that's all contributing to the declining enrollment that the state of California is experiencing. And as we looked at this declining enrollment, it became very apparent a lot of the declining enrollment is happening in the coastal areas and not so much in the inland or eastern part of the state. So those are the reasons the district is experiencing declining enrollment. And not, last but not least, not to mention COVID. COVID also had an impact, as well as charter schools. And we've also seen a pretty large increase in homeschooling. So those are some of the reasons the district is experiencing declining enrollment. As we moved forward through the process with the advisory committee, one of the things that we wanted to keep focus on is that students, let's make sure that whatever recommendations we come up with, that we keep it student-centric. Not to say that budget, facilities, community, and staff are not important, but let's keep students at the center of all of the recommendations and also the conversation. So I think we might have some difficulties, some audio difficulties. I will try to see if we can play this.
Schools in dozens of states are facing a crisis. The Department of Education estimates there are today nearly 2 million fewer students in U.S. public schools than before the pandemic. One of the biggest reasons, America's falling birth rate at its lowest level ever recorded. And fewer students means fewer funds.
If you're trying to operate too many schools, you've taken resources out of your remaining schools to prop up these half-empty ones. And often that means there are not enough resources for extracurriculars, AP classes, and things like that.
But this perfect storm for shutdowns is also fueled by pandemic migration out of big cities and out of public schools, more public dollars going to private, religious, and charter schools, and the drying up of COVID relief money that helped many districts delay the inevitable until now.
We're expecting a lot more school closures in the next year or two as a result of the federal relief money running out.
Which is why some superintendents, like Alicia Johnson in Indianapolis, say they're trying to get ahead of the budgetary cliff with a multi-year plan to consolidate buildings while simultaneously expanding educational offerings.
Change is difficult, and I am not asking, nor do I expect that this is going to be a process that doesn't create situations that families are going to have to do something different. We're trying to do the hard things that need to be done so that we can get to better things for kids and families.
And so the point of this video is that declining enrollment is not just something that's happening in the state of California. It's happening on a national basis. And as you can imagine, very difficult subject, not only in its complexity, but there's also a lot of emotion involved. In a lot of cases, you have folks that have had a school that's been in the neighborhood, in the area for decades. And when you start talking about consolidation, merging, and closing schools, that can become a very emotional issue. Fully understand that.
Schools in
Communication strategy. So one of the things that we noticed from the community or the town hall meetings, the feedback that we got numerous statements and comments about that the communication could have been better. And so we have to take that at heart. But just to let you all know, the strategy that we used to try to communicate what was happening with this initiative, whether it's from the superintendent's office, the communications that came from the superintendent, the sites and departments, having meetings and talking about what happened at the superintendent's advisory committee, and then also the parent notifications that went out, and then conversations with board members. And also we had a lot of information on the district's website/web page. Some of the comments that I personally got was, Michael, that's great information, but it's a lot to sift through. And it's also kind of complicated. And so we have to take that under advisement. And that's an area that we probably could improve upon. But communication, as you will see as I go through the slides, is so important. And one of the things that we always talk about is make sure you give yourself a long runway to get this initiative off the ground. And communicate, communicate, and communicate. And if you're thinking you're communicating too much, communicate some more. Because inevitably there will be a person that will say or raise their hand, no one told me. So that is the reality. So we have to take this under advisement. And again, the purpose here is to be transparent. Because as you can imagine, rumors, the rumor mill, if you will, can get started and can take on a life of its own. So communication, very important. And as we move forward, we need to keep communication at the forefront. Process. So in order to just to summarize the process, you have 3 phases. In phase 1, you essentially establish the advisory committee to essentially develop and establish the recommendations to the superintendent. In phase 1, you also gather the data. So I understand we have declining enrollment. Well, where is the empirical data to support that statement? So a lot of time is spent gathering data, analyzing data, just to establish that the trend of declining enrollment is real. In phase two, the data analysis continues, but in phase two, you start developing options to look at what's possible as far as consolidating schools, merging schools, or even closing schools. And the Superintendent's Advisory Committee is very much involved in that, and they have very robust conversations about what's possible. And we'll walk through that, the process that they went through to come up with their 3 recommendations. And then, as you experienced in April, we had 3 town hall meetings. 3 town hall meetings where we got, as Superintendent Espinoza mentioned, all of the comments are on the wall in this room, in this very room. And then last but not least is phase 3. Once the board makes a decision on how to move forward, if the district does decide to close or consolidate a school, and if there's vacant property, that triggers another process, which I won't go into today. And we're not there yet. Phase 3 is further on downstream. So our focus has been over the last 8 months on phase 1 and on phase 2. In order to provide a clearer picture, I've got this diagram here. Again, it walks through the phases, phase 1, 2, and 3, as I just explained. And then also the time associated with each phase. And then at the bottom of each pillar, in each phase, communicate, communicate, and communicate. So that is essentially the process. And we'll walk you through the results and also the selection process for the Superintendent's Advisory Committee. So the purpose of the Advisory Committee is to advise the superintendent on potential options for managing the district's facilities in a more efficient manner. And again, I punctuate the word advisory. The Advisory Committee is in an advisory role only. Well, how did we select the Advisory Committee? And so we looked at all of the schools and we focused on the schools that had the highest declining enrollment. And I'll walk through the different tiers. Tier 1, as you see on the slide, are those schools, and I'll walk you through the details of that. Tier 1 are the schools with 50% or higher declining enrollment since 11-12. Tier 2 schools are those schools with declining enrollment of 40% or greater, but less than 50. And then tier 3 are those with also declining enrollment, but not as large as 40%. And again, I'm going to walk you through those details and provide you with a pictorial so that's very clear. So we focused on the first 2 tiers, the 6 schools. We wanted to make sure that we had a principal from each of those schools, that we had a certificated, classified, and parent from each of those schools, so that they would be presented. And mind you, we had not talked about any options. No options had been talked about before the establishment of the Advisory Committee. And again, the last bullet there, bullet number 6, the size of the committee. At some point, you can't have a committee that's 100, then it becomes very difficult to manage and to get results. So we wanted to keep the committee at a very manageable level. And so we came up with about 30 members. As I mentioned, we had a principal. We wanted to make sure we had certificated, classified, and parent representation. We also wanted to ensure that we had representation from the district office as it relates to instruction, as it relates to special education, and also for human resources and facilities. So this matrix here kind of shows you the composition of the Superintendent's Advisory Committee. So at the very top in yellow are those schools, and we'll get into more detail on their specific numbers, of those schools with declining enrollment of 50% or more. And in the green, you have those schools with declining enrollment between 40 and 50%. We did include Nestor. Nestor was brought up as a potential solution based on their current facility needs. They have a lot of old relocatable buildings at that site. So Nestor was brought into the fold to provide their input as we move through the process. From the district office, as I just mentioned, we had representation from educational leadership, student support services, special education, human resources, and facilities. And we had a few folks from the business services department, Mr. Lara, and then myself and our administrative assistant provided us a lot of support as we moved through the process. And we also had a guest. The president of the Southwest Teachers Association was there as a guest to observe the activities of the committee. So that's how the committee was established, and that's the process that the district went through in order to establish the Superintendent's Advisory Committee. So data, enrollment data. And you've seen this slide before. This is the district's enrollment history going back to 11-12 and projecting forward to 25-26. And as you can see, it's a 46% drop in enrollment. And then at the bottom in the orange blocks, you see the charters. And again, we're going to talk in detail about these numbers in the next slides. So significant decrease, almost 50%. So here are all of the individual schools broken up into their respective tiers. And looking at the enrollment going back to 11-12 and projecting forward to 25-26. And there you see under the enrollment percent change column, the decrease that the district has experienced over the last about 15 years. And also, just to be clear, for next year and the following year, those are projections. But still a significant decrease. And this data is a matter of public record. At least the actuals are on the California Department of Education website. The actuals from 11-12 all the way through 22-23. Those are on the CDE, California Department of Education website. And to project forward, the district uses a consulting firm to project the enrollment out into the future. Davis Demographic is a consulting firm, and they provide the district with a report every year on enrollment projections moving forward. The charters. We thought it very important to also look at the charters. The district has two dependent charters as opposed to independent charters. And so the dependent charters have actually not experienced the same decline. And as you can see from the numbers, it's significantly better than the regular schools. So district maps. This is again for your information. When we looked at where the most decline in enrollment was happening, Mendoza, Emory, and Barry, it tended to be, as you look at the circle or that oval, in the center part of town. And they happen to be Tier 1 schools. And then here what you have are the boundary areas for each of the schools. And then the next map shows I know it's difficult, at least on the screen to see, but the trustee areas where each of those schools fall. So we spent a few slides looking at South Bay's enrollment going all the way back to 11-12. We thought it also very important, well, how does the district's enrollment decline, if you will, how does it compare to other school districts? So we looked at school districts that are adjacent to the district's boundary area. We looked at San Ysidro for the same time period, a decrease of 24%. We looked at Chula Vista, 4%. And these are some of the schools that are associated with Chula Vista west of, they're usually west of the 805, but they're also experiencing declining enrollment, but not as much as South Bay. National City, declining enrollment, about 29%, almost 30%. Coronado, negative 13%. San Diego County, 7%. And then last but not least, the state of California, about 8%. So you can see that declining enrollment is not something that's just happening at South Bay. It's happening at a number of school districts across the state, and for the reasons that I mentioned at the outset. So we have another video. I don't know if we want to try it. As far as the audio.
Came after a marathon school board meeting. Regnart Elementary is closing, so is Meyerholtz, and students from Muir are being relocated. Parents angry with the board feel like it's a lot of change for students coming off a pandemic.
Their lack of empathy is really disgusting.
So now, but district officials say this decision came down to numbers. With the high cost of living here, they simply don't have enough students to support all these schools.
The board has had conversations and discussions about our student decline in enrollment. We've lost approximately 5,000 students since 2015. We're projected to lose another 4,000 in the next 8 years.
They're not alone. Districts like Oak Grove, Redwood City, and Hayward have all faced similar problems. But the closures leave parents with difficult decisions, and some may not stay.
Our walk now between the two schools we have to pick is about 35 minutes each way. So our only option for parents that can't drive or drop her off every day will be probably to move her to private school.
For months, parents offered the board alternatives to the closures, which they say fell on deaf ears.
They're going to turn our positive energy of the community into negative energy.
But Regnart's PTA president says the focus now must be on easing the transition for the sake of the students.
We definitely want to make sure our kids do not suffer anymore from this decision. So we are definitely going to work together with the other schools and with the district. But at the same time, we still want the district to know how disappointed and frustrated we are.
The schools that are closing will be leased and not sold, leaving the door open for future change. Now, parents in those schools are being given a choice about which school they want to go to next year in the district. They need to make those decisions by November.
So this is an example of a district that had some difficulties with this initiative. And so as I talked about communication, obviously there were some issues there. I would like to add that a lot of times districts that end up either consolidating, merging, or closing schools are in financial distress. And the consolidation of schools, the merging of schools, and the closing of schools is used as a way to drive dollars to the bottom line. I will also add that this district, South Bay, is not in fiscal distress. The district is being proactive and looking forward with an understanding that the issue of declining enrollment is very real, and it's happening. It's happened, and it will continue to happen here at South Bay. So the district is being proactive, where a lot of districts are reactive. They're in fiscal distress and looking for any way to help drive dollars to the bottom line.
Came after a marathon.
Potential solutions. So before I get into the solutions, it's important that I go through some of the assumptions that were made as these solutions and options were developed. Assumption number one, elementary schools, all of the elementary schools and the Nestor Language Academy were considered for potential options. In large case because of their declining enrollment, and Nestor because of its facility challenges. We did not look at Virtual Academy, and we did not look at Imperial Beach as potential options. The base year, as I mentioned earlier, was 11-12 as far as looking at enrollment. And the projected enrollment moving forward, the year was 25-26. And as is written on the slide, we used the Davis Demographic Report of last year. And then all options were based on schools and the adjacent boundary areas. So if a school was considered, we asked the question, well, what are the adjacent schools? And if a particular school is closed, where could they be absorbed? And could they be absorbed in a school that is adjacent to that school's boundary? So you will see that we have some pictures to kind of really illustrate this whole point. As far as the availability of classrooms, we assume that the student-teacher ratio was 24-1. So for example, if you had an 11-12, if you had a school, hypothetically, that had enrollment of 720 kids, you divide that by 24, and you get 30 classrooms. Projecting forward to 25-26, the enrollment has gone from 720 down to 240. You divide 24 into 240, now you have 10 classrooms that are being used. The question becomes, what happened to the 20 that are remaining? You had 30, and now you're only using 10. So what happened to the extra space? Now, assuming that you don't have relocatable buildings and these are permanent structure, and this is the predicament the district is in. You have schools that are at a certain capacity, and over the years, the enrollment has declined so drastically that you have space. So how do we manage those spaces in a more efficient manner? And we did account for the removal of relocatable buildings. And we call this the megaphone slide. Essentially, we looked at about 15 to 16 options, and we were able to narrow it down to 3. But as Superintendent Espinoza mentioned, there is another one that will be presented to you tonight based on the feedback that we received from the town hall meetings last month. Another video, and this is a video from a district that is in physical distress. And you will hear the superintendent tell us about it.
Two local schools to shut their doors for good. Placer County is forcing the Auburn Union Elementary School District to consolidate 5 schools down to 3.
The move comes amid a dire warning that the district won't last if money can't be saved. Let's find out more. CBS 13's Laura Haefele is getting answers on the timeline and talking to teachers, Laura, who say the wrong schools are being targeted.
Yeah, that's right. Today we watched students and teachers walk out of these front doors to Rock Creek Elementary School, some of who say they cannot imagine what it would be like if they were never able to go back through them again. That's a future that teachers and students here at Rock Creek are facing. A dedicated teacher calls her classroom home.
And this is a really tight-knit family. For 23 years, Rachel Barrios has taught at Rock Creek Elementary School. But after more than 2 decades, the school bell may ring for the last time.
I'm pretty emotional about that. And I started here at the school.
The Auburn Union Elementary School District is facing a tough decision come December.
This is really hard. There's no easy way about it.
Amber Lee Alva is a superintendent of 5 schools, more than 1,500 students, and roughly 100 teachers, now forced to find a way to keep classrooms open.
So last December, we had our first interim budget and it was qualified, meaning that we could not show 3 years out that we had enough expenses to cover all of our, enough revenue to cover all of our expenses.
Placer County charged the district with reducing $3 million in spending. The Board of Trustees formulated a plan for that. Increase classroom size and close 2 schools, prioritizing the closure of Alta Vista Community Charter and Rock Creek Elementary, folding students into one of 3 remaining schools. But the Rock Creek community says closing these doors would put families in a tough spot.
A lot of our families are low-income families. A lot of them are working families and they walk. I don't know what they're going to do.
The district is considering a bus route for working families who can't transport students, but for some, that's not enough.
So again, this is an example of a district that was in fiscal distress and used the school consolidation initiative as a way to help them with their financials. Group activity. So as I mentioned and explained the formation of the Superintendent's Advisory Committee, once we got together and we were able to look at all of the data, we had the committee break up into 5 groups and essentially establish their top 3 options. As I showed you the litany of options that they had to look at, again, about 15 to 16 options. When we broke them up into their respective groups, we asked them to identify their top 3 options. And of the top 3, rank your top 3 options, i.e. give us your number 1, give us your number 2, and your number 3. And once you've done that, provide us with the pros and cons for each option. And I must tell you, the committee did a very nice job, and there were some very robust conversations about certain options. But at the end of the day, the committee was able to come together, and this is what it looked like. So we did this 2 times. We did it back in December. The committee got together and essentially came up with their number 1, 2, and 3. And what's highlighted here are the options that kept repeating themselves. For example, Central, as you see from the slide, keeps repeating itself. Nestor to Mendoza, that was a common theme. Now, not to say that, as you see from the slide, there were some other options that were listed, but Central and Nestor to Mendoza were the common theme when the committee voted on their number 1, 2, and 3 in December. Now, that was right before the break. So we had the winter break. Committee came back again, and we asked them to relook at this chart and have another go at it, if you will, on identifying their number 1, 2, and 3 options. And this was on January 16th. So again, I highlighted the recurring themes. Central came up again. Nestor to Mendoza came up again. But what was the new option that kept that was not in the December 5th iteration of this process was the Nestor to Mendoza swap. So that was a new option that the committee came up with. Group 2, Group 3, and also Group 5 came up with that particular option. So just to clarify, what would a central option look like? So Central would move into Mendoza, or the kids from Central would be distributed into Mendoza, Emory, and Bayside. And those are schools with adjacent boundary areas. Option number 2, Nestor to Mendoza, where the kids from Mendoza would be distributed to either Central, Emory, Sunny Slope, or Berry. And then the last option, Nestor to Mendoza swap. Nestor goes to Mendoza, and Mendoza goes to Nestor. And the reason you see the circles around Mendoza and Central, if all 3 of these options, or if option 1 and 2 are the option the district decides to move forward with, if you do number 1 and 2, then that means for Central, Mendoza would not be an option. let me just repeat that. So if the board would decide to move forward with options 1 and 2, because Mendoza is part of 2, the kids from Central would not be able to go to Mendoza unless they became part of Nestor. And the same thing for Nestor. If Nestor to Mendoza option, if Central is also an option, Central will not be an option in number 2, or a school that the Nestor and Mendoza kids would be able to go to. So this is what, again, another way to look at this. Central, moving forward with its projected enrollment, would need about 13 available classrooms. And Emory and Bayside would have enough room to accommodate them. Now, Mendoza again falls off. If Nestor and Mendoza is an option, then Mendoza is not an available option for Central kids to go to. Also, what is mentioned, what is shown here, is the modernization cost. The modernization cost for Central, $49 million. And one of the things that did come up in the conversations with the committee and the individual groups was the modernization cost for Central. It's significantly, it's very high, and relative to the other schools, it is the highest. And Scope 0, based on the district's latest facility master plan, are those critical needs, things that need to be taken care of. The pros and cons for the Central option: you forego the $49 million modernization cost. There are adjacent boundaries that kids can go to, or schools in adjacent boundaries that kids can go to. Better facilities for the Central students. The special day classes at Emory would also be available to the kids at Central. And then you would have a vacant property. And it's used to be determined at some other point, probably in phase 3. Some of the cons associated with it: huge adjustments for the community. There's a transition period, the distribution of the students, relocation of the Family Resource Center, and then there's transportation. All those things would need to be considered. The next option is Nestor Mendoza distributed. And again, the same methodology. Nestor moving forward would need about 43 classrooms. Mendoza moving forward would need about 18. And when you look at Nestor to Mendoza, Mendoza currently has about 41 classrooms. And that's that block that's X'd out at the bottom. And the reason it's X'd out is because 41 is less than 43. And so we would potentially have to add a couple relocatable buildings to house all of the kids at Nestor. And then the Mendoza, I think it's pretty straightforward. All of the schools in the adjacent boundary areas would have enough room or available classrooms to absorb the kids from Nestor, from Mendoza. The pros and cons: there is a $25 million modernization cost associated with Nestor. The district would avoid that cost. There would be a better facility. Mendoza is a better facility than Nestor. Nestor would be centrally located. The district would be able to remove the portable buildings at Nestor. And from what I understand, they're quite old, and they should be removed. And then you would have potentially a vacant property. And the use of that property to be decided at some future point. The cons: adjustment for nearly half the community, longer transition, benefits to charter school, and then the distribution of the Mendoza kids. So these are all comments that came from the individual groups of the committee. The last option, Nestor to Mendoza swap. Again, this is pretty straightforward. Nestor goes to Mendoza, Mendoza goes to Nestor. The pros: the schools remain intact, better facilities for Nestor, and would also allow the district to remove the portable buildings. The cons, least preferred by the committee. And you'll see when I take you through the voting, there's a transportation issues. This option probably does not net you any savings. And again, also no savings on modernization costs. So as I mentioned at the outset of the presentation, we always wanted to keep students at the forefront or make this whole initiative student-centric. So we also looked at, well, how does this benefit students? Well, the options would allow the reduction of combination classes, improve teacher collaboration, differentiated instruction opportunities, and also additional opportunities for student programs. So these are some of the benefits associated with a school consolidation, merger, or closure. Potential savings. Usually when you have a school consolidation, a merger or a closure, most of the savings are generated by personnel reductions. For example, if a school is closed and the kids are distributed into other schools or consolidated into another school, the question you have to ask yourself is, well, now we have two principals. Do you need two principals? The clerical staff, do you need the same clerical staff that you have at the receiving school? Also for custodial kinds of things, the question usually becomes, do we need to have that personnel for the closed school? And also, as I mentioned, there are facility and modernization costs that could be saved as a result of a consolidation, merger, or a closure. I'm going to walk you through these numbers here. At the town hall meetings, one of the questions that we got was that there seemed to be some confusion on, let's see here. There seemed to be some confusion. Well, what's the general fund and what's the facility fund and why isn't this all lumped together? So let me just be very clear about this. The general fund is for the district's general operating activities. All your salaries and benefits for your staff are in the general fund. This is the fund to allow you to run your day-to-day operations for the district. The facility fund, a separate fund. The funds in that particular fund can only be used on facility modernization, construction kinds of things. And so this is a restricted fund. So the district currently has available to it the proceeds from Measure X, and that was brought into the district in the Fund 21, the facility fund, about a year and a half ago, about $11 million, used for construction projects. We never want to commingle these funds. They are separate, and they are separate for a reason. So for each of the initiatives or options, there is a general fund savings. And initially we had a one number, but depending on the assumptions, I thought it better if we just provided a range. So from the general fund, you could have potential savings of about $500,000 to almost $1 million. And then from the facility side, and this is central, as I mentioned, the 49 million, that's in the facility master plan. But the longer you wait, the more expensive it gets. It's called escalation. And the same thing with Nestor on the general fund side, anywhere between 800,000 to 1.2 million savings in the general fund. And then based again on the current facility master plan and projecting forward a range of savings anywhere between 18 to $23 million. Again, in that specific fund. The last option, Nestor to Mendoza swap. I tried pretty hard. I find it very difficult to see any savings there. I just could not. I looked at a lot of different options, a lot of different assumptions, could not really come up with any savings for that particular option. So how did the Superintendent's Advisory Committee, how did they vote? The committee's number one option was Central. Their number one option, their number two option was Nestor Mendoza Distributed. Their number three option was Nestor Mendoza Swap. And again, we had 26 members that voted at that time. And so that was on the 27th of February. So again, ladies and gentlemen, as Superintendent Espinoza mentioned at the outset, this is a work in progress. No decisions have been made. I know I've taken you through a lot of information in a very short period of time. So I fully understand if you probably have some questions and some things that you might not have understood. And so that's the reason that we're here, to make sure that you have as much information as possible as we move forward. So in the month of April, we had 3 town hall meetings. Again, as part of the process. And we wanted to hear, oh, by the way, what does the community think about what the committee came up with? 3 town hall meetings on April 3rd, April 17th, and April 24th. We essentially broke up the groups at each of the town hall meetings into 5 groups. Process, we looked at process. We wanted each group to be able to, or each facilitator of the group to be able to talk about the process that was used, the Central option, the Nestor Mendoza option, the Nestor Mendoza swap option, and also provide us with any other ideas. And so we were able to gather all of that input. And as I mentioned earlier, it's on the wall. And we all also put that in an Excel spreadsheet, and it's on the district's website for anyone to look at. And we were able to get a lot of input. And so what did we hear? And this is just a summary: lack of transparency, communication. Point noted. Comments for Central were both for and against closure, but the driving factor, the recurring theme, was this $49 million modernization cost. Nestor Mendoza Distributed, positive for Nestor, negative for Mendoza. Nestor to Mendoza swap, kind of mixed comments, either for or against, and really didn't generate a lot of support. The other ideas group generated some ideas that we hadn't considered, that the committee had not considered. So we did get, I would say, some good feedback. So with that, I've taken you through the process on how the 3 options were determined. I've taken you through the town hall meetings and the feedback that we got, which takes me to this next, I would say, a critical inflection point. We'll have Superintendent Espinoza talk about the superintendent's rebuilding concept.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. You know, and do we have that concept up there? Okay, perfect. Before I go over this concept, I do want to clarify that based on the committee's input and based on some of the input from the community, we found it necessary to have something that we could look at, right? We developed a concept from all that input, and this is that concept. I'm going to go over it a little bit, but I want to make sure that it is understood that this is not a final draft, right? This is a concept. This is something that we can explore. If the board decides that this is a concept they'd like us to explore, then staff is going to go back and start to work on specifics. There's a lot of questions, a lot of details that still have to be worked out. But this serves as a really good concept that we can discuss. It really is for discussion purposes. But nevertheless, a lot of thinking was put behind this concept. And so I would say that the basic concept is something that we could work with. So if you will, I would ask you to think of our district, if you look at the map, as 3 different sections. The San Diego section, which of course is, on the 5 and on the other side. I consider Mendoza, Emory, Berry, kind of the central section of our district. And then, of course, the IB section of our district. So just in terms of the concept, that's really how we were looking at that. And so the idea is that first, we really only need 2 facilities, 2 schools in each one of those sections, if we leave both charters alone. So the charters, we really wouldn't touch too much. But we really need 2 facilities in each one of those sections to be able to meet the needs of all the students that we have. We would also suggest that those 2 schools be separated by grade levels. So in this example, we have Pence as the TK3 school and Nikolov as the 4 to 6 school. Mendoza could be, and please don't get hung up on which one would be TK3, which one would be 4, 5, 6. This is just an example. We could flip those later on. Mendoza would be 4 to 6. Emory would be TK3. And we didn't update that on this example, but that's what the thought is. Oneonta in that other section would be 4 to 6. Bayside would be TK3, and then Imperial Beach charter would be TK8. So that would be kind of the structure of the district. Now, layering on top, that we also believe, and we heard this in the feedback of the town halls, we believe that we need to have very robust programs that are going to help keep our students here within our district. So the South San Diego area, that area we would say is going to focus on dual language. So for example, Pence would have a TK3 dual language strand, and Nikolov would be the 4 to 6 dual language, right? They would have that strand as well as a SEI strand, so English instruction, primary English instruction. Mendoza and Emory would be the VAPA Central. That's where the visual and performing arts would really focus in those areas. And the Imperial Beach area would be the Imperial Beach Environmental Science Charter School. We believe that is an issue that's relevant to Imperial Beach. Our mayor, who is here and who's been doing a lot of work around the environmental impact that the sewage has had in our area, thank you for doing that. But we also believe that is a very important aspect that our students would really benefit from learning about. Environmental science has a couple of different strands. So Bayside STEAM Academy would also focus in a strand around environmental science, and Oneonta would focus in the same strand or a different strand of environmental science. The other concept, and I know this is a lot, but again, this is a discussion starter. The other idea is that all our schools would be open enrollment. And what that means is that within the district boundary, our students would be able to apply to go to any one of the schools. It'd be choice, right? It'd be open enrollment. So basically, enrollment opens in March. I, as a parent, go and I fill it out and I say, I really want my child to be in dual language. And then they would be able to go there. Or I want my child to be in environmental science, they would be able to go there. I want my child to be in VAPA, then they would be able to go there. So it's an open enrollment concept. That's going to help with a couple of different things. Number one, it's going to provide choice for our families. Number two, it's really going to drive, our families to register early. We have a real big issue around registration, and it's really hard to plan, especially when you know you're declining enrollment. It's really hard to plan when we have, 500 families registering in August when we started in July, right? That's really difficult. So that would really promote doing that. Okay, so that is the concept that we are presenting to the board. And I am sure that the board has a lot of questions around that. And again, once the board decides one direction or the other, then staff would go and figure out the details. Transportation, loud and clear, we have heard it. And our transportation director would start to work on the transportation plan. So another really important, detail to understand, just because this is the concept that we have here tonight doesn't mean that it's feasible. Once the board gives us direction, then we are going to do feasibility studies. We're going to make sure that we're able to do this, and then it's going to come back. Like Michael Taylor said earlier, we have managed, or we have created some time before we actually have to do something. Our district is not in financial stress right now, but if we continue going the way we are, we will be in financial stress soon. That gives us an opportunity to really look into the details and identify what works and what doesn't work. And then a final plan would come back to the board for approval. All right, and I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Rigo. Laura.
President Quinones, I forgot, we also looked at some pros and cons of these of this rebuilding concept. More choice for students and parents, reduces combination classrooms. Again, when you are focusing by grade level, then one of the problems that we have right now with really tiny schools is that you might have one teacher per grade level. It's really hard to work in a professional learning community with just one other person. When you add, the same grade level, TK to 3, then you're going to have a couple of teachers that are able to work together. Helps focus the instructional program. We need to guarantee that our students are reading at grade level by 3rd grade. If we had a school of just TK to 3, we would be able to focus the professional development, the collaboration that needs to happen, the strategies that teachers might need to implement. We would be able to focus that at that grade level. And then 4, 5, 6, there'd be other focus in those areas. We felt that there's a lot of great ideas in this concept. Mendoza remains in its current state, and we rebuild the VAPA program that even in our a lot of the input that we're getting around our LCAP, that continues to come up. And we also believe, and I know the board believes this, I believe this, that we need to build that program so that, our students, again, are benefiting from that and they're choosing to stay with us. It helps with, oh, I'm sorry, I did miss one big part. Nestor Language Academy would stay as a 4 to 8. So the current site would stay as a 4 to 8. And at the current site at Berry, it would be the Nestor Language Academy TK to 3. So those two sites would be split. That would allow us to remove a lot of the portables, which are not a good situation at Nestor. And I believe it's also going to help with some of the traffic that happens in that area. Financial savings from closure of Sunny Slope, Berry, and Central. Central in this concept and based on the recommendation of the committee, Central would close. And it allows more time to reconsider all options. Some of the cons: additional closures of Sunny Slope and Berry. That's a con, definitely. Transportation, we have to figure that out. Grade configuration change at 5 schools. Timing is a big question. You know, there's this idea of, do we do this in phases? Given that Central is recommended as a school to close, do we start there first? But then if we're going to restructure the grade levels, then are we going to continue to ask students to move? So given that, the other idea is, do we just rip off the Band-Aid and say, we're going to do that all in one phase, and then slowly phase in the other areas? A lot of parts, a lot of details to figure out. Another pro to this concept is that this would be a plan that would probably, I mean, we project would meet our needs for the next 5 to 10 years. It's really hard to tell with declining enrollment. And we're hoping that we're able to slow down the decline in enrollment to at least what the districts around us are, you know, what they're declining at. Okay, now any questions?
Thank you, Superintendent. Real quick before I open it up to the trustees. Slide 55, number 3, equity, AB 1912. Could you share with us about the equity piece, and number 4, California Environmental Quality Act? Both those two subjects on page 55, Superintendent?
Yes. I can answer that question,
you.
President Quinones. So let me just start with AB 1912. Essentially, AB 1912 came about in September of 22. And essentially, the purpose is to ensure that a district in fiscal distress conduct an equity impact analysis. And again, back to this whole notion of fiscal distress. A lot of districts that are in fiscal distress are using school closures to help save money. And so the intent of AB 1912 is to ensure that the demographic, or certain demographic, does not get disproportionately impacted in a negative way. So that's the whole purpose. So that was an assembly bill that was passed in September 22. Now, following that, the Attorney General of the state of California, Rob Bonta, came out with a similar communication. And this communication essentially says, even if you're not in fiscal distress, you should be conducting equity impact analysis to ensure that you don't have a certain demographic that is negatively impacted by a closure of a school. And they have 9 criteria that you need to follow. So that's essentially an explanation about AB 1912, and also the Attorney General's letter about AB 1912. I hope that answers the question. And then also the last item, CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act. So whenever there is any kind of construction, you need to make sure, or public entities need to make sure that there's not a negative impact on traffic. So now you have this new school. Have you done your CEQA analysis? Is it going to generate more traffic in that particular part of town? What about noise? What about additional pollution? So that's really the emphasis behind CEQA, to ensure when there is new construction that you take the environment into consideration and the impact that this new project would have on the environment.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the explanation. We'll go ahead and open the floor to the Board of Trustees. Anyone would like to go first? Turn your microphone on and
Can I just add something? Can we hold this for, I don't want this to go into the discussion. I think we should have public comment before it goes into discussion.
Thank you, Superintendent.
And any questions about the specific presentation at this point? And then we could go into public, just to clarify anything about the presentation, and then we'll go to public comment, and then the board could do discussion.
Thank you, Superintendent. I was getting ahead of myself. Public comment is always welcome, and you're right, we take public comment first. Ms. Cooper, do we have any public comments at this time?
Yes, we do. We have 8.
8. Board of Trustees, we have 8 public comments at 3 minutes apiece. Are we okay with that? Everybody's good? Please call the first public comment.
Melissa Romo.
No, it's not red. There you go.
Testing. Good afternoon, Superintendent Espinosa, President Quiñones, Board of Trustees, and South Bay Union School District community. My name is Melissa Romo. I am a 4th grade teacher at Teofilo Mendoza Elementary School. I'm here today to shed light on the human side of the life-changing decision you are about to make. My hope is that you will open your minds and lead with your hearts when making the impactful decision of whether to close or consolidate schools in our district. Teofilo Mendoza was a shining star in our district. It opened in 1999 with a state-of-the-art campus and a vision of a thriving visual performing arts program. Jay Hollingsworth, our jefe, as Marla Fernandez nicknamed him, was the first principal to believe in the great opportunities that Mendoza School had to offer this community. He had a vision and passion that was undeniably contagious. He created a team that shared in his vision, and Mendoza became a flourishing school. Our jefe was truly the best leader that we've ever had the opportunity to work with. I know he is rolling in his grave at our current situation and the thought of our school possibly being shut down. You have no idea how difficult these past few years have been for our Mendoza team. First, our VPA program slowly disappeared. Then the news of the passing of our beloved jefe. Then we were left without a leader for half a year. And now, most recently, we have been threatened with the possibility of having to move or be disbanded completely. The morale and emotional state of our staff has been unsteady, to say the least. You have to understand that we are not just colleagues, we are a family. I personally have been a Mendoza Explorer for 24 years. That is more than half of my life. We've grown up together. Over the past 25 years, we've been through weddings, births, raising of children, divorces, medical leaves, and deaths of loved ones. We have been through good times and bad times. We get through these tough situations because we are a strong community that supports and believes in one another. It is not just our workplace, it is our second home. If this is causing stress and anxiety for us, the adults, can you imagine what our students are going through? Ms. Medina, Ms. Liker, Mr. Lopez, try explaining to your children that their school may possibly be shut down and they will have to be divided amongst the rest of the schools in the area. What kind of impact would that have on their emotional well-being? Teofilo Mendoza was once the jewel of South Bay Union School District. We now have second-generation students attending our school. The thought that we may have to tell our families to go elsewhere is heartbreaking. As if it wasn't bad enough that our identity was taken away, now there is the threat of our home being taken away and the possibility of our family being torn apart. Please explore other options. If removing us from our home is the only choice, then at least have the compassion to keep our Mendoza family united. Our community deserves a thoughtful process and decision that is not only based on money, but also on empathy and our well-being. Thank you for your time.
Raquel Mendoza Gonzalez.
Good afternoon. My name is Raquel Mendoza Gonzalez. I'm here representing the Mendoza family, those of us who could not be here today. I'm not here to debate the need to make change or any of that. I'm an attendance clerk at another local school district. I understand declining enrollment all too well. But I am here on behalf of the family to respectfully request that in some way you keep Teofilo Mendoza school together, or at least keep his name alive in some way, shape, or form. To give you some background, my family has been in this community for many, many, many years. We go way back. My grandfather's brothers, Sotero and Rosalio, both helped build Balboa Park for the exposition in 1915. My father was born in 1931 at Rancho Catron here on Leon Avenue. My grandparents, although immigrants, they became American citizens, and they're both interred at Mount Olivet on Iris Avenue, which in itself is an honor as it is a historical cemetery. My grandfather bought the farm, and here is a picture of it, in 1947 with the help of my father and my grandmother's canary money. It became an important hub for the community as well as the family. Each one of my siblings, the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, when we were born, the first stop was 2050 Coronado Avenue, straight from the hospital. It is a very important part of our family. I often run into people who don't know I'm connected to Teofilo Mendoza, and everyone fondly remembers my grandfather, his vegetable shack, my grandmother's canaries. People that never imagined that I'm related some way are always impressed when I tell them that's my grandfather. My dad's proudest moment, he said, aside from the birth of all of his children, was the day the school was inaugurated. My grandfather didn't live long enough to see the school built. It was a working farm up until the day the school district acquired the land, and it probably would still be a working farm to this day if that had not occurred. I literally just left my brother's sister and my father's sister and his brother before this meeting, and they insisted that I bring a picture of the farm to show where all of this started. It is very important to us as a family. Obviously, very selfishly, I'm here to ask on our behalf, but it's also in some way we would like to honor his historical memory, much as the community has honored the Egger family. We still consider Egger Highlands. We have Robert Egger Senior Park. That is very historical to the community, as well as my grandfather was monumental to the community, and he was well acquainted with the Egger family at that time. I know it seems selfish of me to ask of this. With all of this, I know money and budgets and declining enrollment is a very important thing. But we also feel that keeping the name is so important because representation matters. He's a Hispanic immigrant with an immigrant name whose perseverance and hard work accomplished the American dream for his family and the entire community. It would be a shame to lose that history. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Very
Kayla
valuable.
Stanley.
Thank you. Next call.
Kayla Stanley.
Hello? Okay. All right. I'm Kayla Stanley. My students go to VIP and to Central at the moment. There's no question that Central School lacks a modern touch and that the entire campus needs work. It comes as no surprise that after decades of neglect, it would cost more than $49 million to bring it up to standards. Our students at Central deserve a better classroom, a better cafeteria, a better library, and better playgrounds. If that means that we must consolidate and close Central, then so be it. But let's do it with a plan in mind. There is a reason that our enrollment is down 50%. There is something wrong here. Have we done enough research to find out why families are running away from our district? I hear that we are not in financial distress. So it seems like if we were to close Central, we should be able to use some of the upwards of $100 million in bonds, classroom repair bonds that we want to get passed in November. We should be able to use half of that to update Central, work on increasing our enrollment, or at least attracting other families that are right now going elsewhere. And then if we stabilize or get more students, we have a facility that could still be used. Closing Central to avoid the need for renovations, that doesn't make sense without a plan to update while the campus is unused for a couple of years. That's all.
Thank you. Next call.
Melanie Ellsworth.
President Quinones, trustees, superintendent. I actually had this written and it's a little bit on the grumpy side. Not negative, but just a little grumpy because it was based on the information that has been presented to us in this whole process so far. But I must say what you gave as option number 4 gives me great hope. It was creative. It addresses needs. You're mentioning the 3rd grade threshold there for readers. There are issues, like I see 2 other schools closed, but you mentioned also a feasibility study. So I look forward to that, and I appreciate Michael saying communicate, 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 because that's what will get us through this without everybody, again, being grumpy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jared Dougherty.
Oh, good enough. All right. Good evening. I'm looking at this pretty cold-heartedly. So Central is going to cost 49 million, right? Roughly. So my big question is, are we going to be known for the district that had schools shut down and it's taken years to go by, or are we just going to rip the Band-Aid off? And that's more or less kind of what I want to know is, are we just going to rip the Band-Aid off and deal with it? Or is it going to be prolonged and something that we have to continuously hear about and be known for? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Superintendent.
Susan Connors.
Good evening, President Quinones, board members, superintendent, community. Let me start by saying thank you for being proactive and staying ahead of the curve on the information that we're looking at. And I had a couple of questions regarding Prop X, Y, and NN monies. And because I know that they were for modernization. And I'm not sure if Central received any of those or if it was just kicked down the road a bit. And where can we find the actuals for those as to how much money is left in those bonds? And as a person whose school was closed or repurposed, I know this is a hard decision and it to impact the least of students and staff. I find it interesting that the 3 schools circled on the documents are the focus of the study, but Central was not circled. I did have a whole bunch of other comments, but I crossed them out because I love the suggestion of the superintendent, his new plan that he proposed tonight. I like a lot of the aspects of it, having 2 children who went through our visual and performing arts program when it was here at IB. And they loved it. They had a great time. I can't say enough for the visual and performing arts. Let's see, I cannot support the closure of Sunny Slope or Central only because of the hardship to the families. The whole point of having the community schools grants are to have community schools. There are really not any other schools that are close to Sunny Slope. So you would be transporting those children quite a ways. And hopefully we can find programs that would draw students to those schools. So I'm very happy to hear that we have plans in, or potentially to draw students back into our district, because as long as I've been working for the district and now retired for many years, we've had declining enrollment and it's been a problem. And I know that our communities are getting older. So I'm hoping that we can find programs to draw students in. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Vanessa Barrera.
Good evening, trustees, executive team, parents, colleagues, and community members. As previously addressed with Superintendent Espinosa, the Southwest Teachers Association is concerned with the process and the lack of community voice. First, the name of the committee did not clearly communicate its intended functions. The selection process for parents and community representatives was insufficient, resulting in only 3 parents on the committee, with only 2 attending meetings consistently. Communication with educational partners was inadequate. Some principals shared meeting details, while others did not. Originally, no information was disseminated to parents, only posted somewhere on our website, not easy to access. Additionally, committee options were limited from the outset. Guidance materials and resources presented focused solely on school closures. Videos and readings did not explore alternative options or solutions. Furthermore, parents and the community were not included in the initial decision-making process. They were only brought in after recommendations were formed, rather than being an integral part from the beginning. Perhaps the most critical consequence of school closures is the displacement of students from their neighborhoods. This could create an opening for for-profit charter schools to expand in these areas. We risk losing not only 10% of our students, but potentially much more. As we saw with the opening of Stephen Hawkins, which drew a significant number of students away from our district. They started with 300 students, and now they have over 1,000 students. Where do you think our students from Nikolov and Pence are? The Southwest Teachers Association urges the board to allow the committee to revisit all options, considering alternatives. By doing so, the board can ensure a more inclusive and effective decision-making process. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Elisa Gutierrez.
Good evening, President Quinones, members of the board, and Superintendent Espinosa. Thank you for your time. I come here as a parent, a staff member, a community member, but most of all as a committee member from the SAC team. And I've said it before, I've said it in our meetings, that I don't normally come on to committees anymore after my 28 years in the district because I felt that nobody listened and it was pointless. But I changed my mind on this one because I felt that it was close to the heart, not just for my job, but for my school and for my community. I had my son go to Mendoza because I wanted him to be in the VPA program. Unfortunately, COVID changed all of that. He wasn't able to do that. He did 4th and 5th grade via 3rd and 4th grade via Zoom. 5th grade separated online. And 6th grade, he got to go back fully. I feel that this committee took a lot of time, a lot of thought into what we presented, but I also feel that it wasn't represented correctly. What the committee came up with is not necessarily how it's presented here. I said it at our last meeting. I feel that Mr. Taylor presents it in his vision, not in our vision. Our vision was at the end to close Central because of the cost, redo the boundaries, and see what happens next. This completely is different. He's focusing on Nestor coming to Mendoza and Mendoza being spread apart. I want you guys to see that. I want you to see that the committee took many, many hours in what we thought was going to be a good decision. We had conversations that were very difficult. I myself said, if Mendoza has to close because of the numbers, it is what it is. I have 28 years of experience and seniority here. I have a job. I'm safe. It's not about that. It's about what the committee came to present and what Mr. Taylor is not presenting. It's completely different. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out this evening again, and thank you for your public testimony and your reflection on how the committee. One more card. Come on up. Come on up. Hand it to Ms. Cooper. You're welcome. All is important.
Is it good evening already? Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Edwin Rendon. I'm an uncle of a student at Mendoza. And I'm thinking like, geez, you know, if we're gonna put the kids in front at the top tier, they should actually be more here, right? I haven't been to any of your meetings and workshops, but I'm just gathering everything that's here on paper and everything that I'm feeling, yeah? Listen, there's nothing worse, I would say, than splitting kids apart, especially when the first group of people that you form outside your family are your friends in school. Very important to have that outer circle. And it's detrimental that that keeps together. We've all had lifelong friends. I've had best friends, but the best are the ones that are lifelong, no matter if you met them in elementary or in adult life, and you keep them forever. It's not fair for any school to close, but of course, age and deterioration is a true cause of these buildings and other equipment just becoming obsolete. Everything is planned obsolescence even more than ever before. So I'm looking through these things and I'm thinking, okay, my nephew should stay at his school. He has this group of friends. Other kids at schools have needs at their campuses can probably be moved around together and not split apart. How you're saying, Superintendent. Don't split those kids apart. That would be the worst thing anybody. I'm sure you could shift them around and then maybe bring them back to their campuses. That would be ideal. Maybe have some of those kids move around. Hey, if you're interested in the arts or science, go to the schools, maybe during the time that you're at Mendoza. Why not? Doesn't have to be limited to what campus you select. Also, with the money you all have, I'm sure you can maintain and innovate some of the campuses that have the current needs right now to assimilate these students that you're about to move, or that you're wanting to move, or whatever it may be going through, the third option there. That's sort of, I'm sure the third option is somewhere written. It's not something that's going to be down the road. I'm sure it's somewhere written. So I understand the decline in enrollment, but let's make it comparable to other communities that you say are coastal. You're comparing to Coronado. Yeah, I mean, it's coastal, but let's take a look at the income bracket. Want to compare it to Oceanside, want to compare it to other communities further up the coast in LA that do have some of the similar environments that we have, as far as communities that have been, and I hate to say underserved, I hate to say, let's just say unattended, okay? Okay, you have many ways to communicate with everybody. We have Class Dojo, don't we? I get those messages. Even after I change my phone, I still get them on the email. So if there's any transparency to be had there, I would love to use Class Dojo for us to be on top of that, okay? That's how I get the messages from students, from the teachers, PTA, and also the principal. So thank you for that. And I'm thinking, you said something about less students. What if we have less students in the classroom? So what are you going to do with so many more classrooms? Well, less students, more attention, right? Less students, more individualized attention, because that's what we need. Not more students, less teachers. Or if you're going to do that, put three teachers in the classroom. My goodness, oh yeah, parking. You have the South Bay Drive-In parking lot. My goodness, maybe on Wednesday it may be an issue, but you have a huge parking lot right there. You have transit lines. You have Southwest High. I'm sure brothers and sisters that go there. I graduated from Southwest High School. I know the Eggers. I'm sure they may even back me up with all this stuff. It doesn't matter. I'm just here voicing my concerns. I know I have more than 3 minutes. I'm sorry to be the last one, but I had all these things just kind of come up. And if there's anything I can do on my end, well, I know some people, and I've just been thinking of all this advancements in technology, that if we don't wake up to it, we're going to stay behind another 25 years. If we don't get up with everything that's happening right now with AI, with all these wonderful applications. And if we merge those two things together, I bet you kids are going to be back on the streets, playing, learning, and having a wonderful time in their academic process. 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
We have one more. If you'd like to speak, fill out a blue card, bring them on up. Now's your time.
Hi, my name is Angela Gonzalez, and I'm a student from Mendoza that does music for our school, and if you can help us save Mendoza, that'll be I'll be really happy, because over there is my second home where I talk to my friends and be happy over there. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Norma. This is my son. And he's a second generation from me, my daughter. She's already 10th grader, and she attends Mendoza too. And there's my teachers that helped me raise her. Now she's a 10th grader, and she's taking AP classes. She's taking Southwestern courses, thanks to them. This is not just a school for us. These are my parents that are helping. It is a community. It's not just a school. That's asking for you to save our family, our school, and our teachers. I'm really grateful right now. He has an amazing teacher. As you can tell, he can speak by himself, thanks to them. We are here to ask you to save Mendoza. This is a family, a community. You know the importance for these kids to be right now here, asking you what they're going through in their mind, knowing that they can change schools. the damage that you're putting on them by closing their school, their teachers, their community. We are gathered here to ask you guys, please, thank you. I'm here to thank you for getting us a second option. Thank you. Thank you for working with us and listening to us. Thank you.
Last call for a public comment card. Last call. Thank you again for coming and thank you for your comments. We'll move on to discussion from the board. Trustees, now we'll open up the discussion from the board. Who'd like to? Excuse me, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I almost don't know where to begin. There was a lot. So the first three plans that were proposed, it was really hard to hear. I was like, I didn't feel that they were fair. I didn't think that they represented it was hard to believe that that's what really came out of the meeting. But anyhow, I feel excited for the other option. Not necessarily exactly like this, but I see the superintendent with this plan. I see the cards reflected in these ideas, and I appreciate that. And I hope that it starts to set the tone for trust that we're listening and no decisions have been made beforehand. I hope that this is just the beginning of us working together that way. And I think about like, okay, we see our charter schools, they're the ones that don't have declining enrollment. What do they have? They have programs. They have the dual language program. They have 8th grade. So when we're looking at this redistribution, maybe somewhere in the middle section, maybe somewhere in the middle section. Sorry, is this what I need to do? Maybe somewhere in the middle section of the district, we have an 8th grade opportunity there as well. I think having a transition time would be key for our students. I love that there's an option for students to pursue their interests and with open enrollment, or go to the school that's closest to you, like whichever is best for families. And I understand that friends being separated and coworkers being separated is hard, but hard decisions need to be made. My friends have been my best friends since 4th grade, so I get that. But we didn't go to the same school either. We were neighbors, so we maintained those friendships. And my coworkers that I was friends with throughout at different schools, even though we don't work in the same schools or even the same districts, we're still friends. We still make that time for each other. Even though the change was hard to move away, like looking at the greater good for all of our students is important. This would affect my kiddos. My little one would be moving to a different school. And I hope that as we make these tough decisions and we figure out all the details, know that we're looking at all of our schools and all of our kids and trying to do the best for all of them, given the difficult choices that need to be made. So, oh, also, would teachers have a choice? Would teachers have a choice to move? Like if their passion is science, or if their passion is dual language or whatever. I don't know how this all works with the discussion things. I'm just going over my notes.
Yes.
So
And I would say, you know, I really don't see a reason why teachers wouldn't have an option. Definitely, I think if, you know, if I want to focus in the science, right, in the science area, and I'm passionate for that, I would love to be able to place our teachers where their interests lie. Obviously, it's something that we would work through with our labor partners, SWADA, to, you know, make sure that we have that opportunity or however that's going to work. But I don't see a reason why we wouldn't be able to have our teachers choose.
and again, back to the transition time, like maybe sooner rather than later, we can move our little ones to the schools of their choice. Whereas some of our older students who are finishing up their elementary school years can finish out the last couple together, because those ages are rough and you do need your friends. That is all.
Thank you, trustee Liker. Those were, I wrote notes. Thank you. Trustee Jose.
First, I want to say thank you for all the hard work that was put in to do all this. And it is not an easy decision. I'm glad that we don't have to rush into this. And I am very confident that we're going to make the best decision that we can for the students. And we are taking in, you know, all the feedback. As I sit here, don't know if I should feel sad, frustrated, angry at the situation that we're in, because our kids are not leaving the district for just any reason. We saw the facts around declining enrollment. It's housing costs, right? It's the birth rates. People cannot afford to have children when you're paying so much of your income on rent, right? The top three things are all connected with housing costs. People are leaving the state, not because they don't like California. It's because they cannot afford to live here, right? They're not leaving our district because they don't love San Diego, right? It's because San Diego is the most expensive city in the whole country. And it's so sad because no matter what we do, nothing stops our families from moving out of our district next year when their rent increases. Nothing stops our families from being able to stay in this district when their building gets bought up by an investor and evicts everybody just because they want to make substantial repairs. So I'm so grateful for our Imperial Beach elected officials that are here. And I'm disheartened to see an empty seat from the city of San Diego. I really ask that for everybody who goes to Mendoza, call your city council representative, call Vivian Moreno, and tell her that your kids deserve to stay in their school. And for the elected officials here in Imperial Beach, we thank you for being here, for listening to the community, because nobody wants to leave this district, right? But families are being pushed out every single day. Even as a school board representative, right? As a director for a nonprofit organization, right? Where I make a good wage. I'm not going to be able to be in this seat much longer when my rent goes up next month. I'm going to have to fight to stay in this district in order to serve this community. And I'm not sure what's going to happen after September. My son tells me, Dad, why do we have to move? I love my community. I don't want to leave my friends, but there's nothing that I can do. There's no way that I can afford to pay another $400 a month. So I say that, to just, bring up the fact that we're doing the best that we can to serve the children of this district. I remember in third grade when they built Mendoza, when half my friends moved to Mendoza. Mr. Hollingsworth was my principal, and he left. And it's crazy to think that 25, 30 years later, Mendoza hired their first bilingual principal. There's a lot of changes coming to this district, changes that are for the good. And we're all going to work together to make sure that our kids come up on top. So I'm really grateful for all these different options. I thank the superintendent for being creative and thinking outside of the box. I think there's a lot of things that we can do. I look forward to continuing this discussion. There's a lot of things around housing. I know we're talking about building housing for teachers. I think we can build housing for our community. And as we're moving forward with the community schools model, I think, some of these ideas could be hubs for our neighborhoods and for our kids. So, I look forward to the continuing discussion and continuing to get the feedback from you all. Thank you.
And I just want to point out that we do have somebody here from the city of San Diego. So if you could just give us a wave there. Thank you.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming. It's always nice when San Diego's in the house, but it's very special because IB is always in the house. So thank you all for coming. We'll move on to Trustee Medina. We're going to pause for a cause. Does anybody need a break? Nope. Moving on. Oh, yep. Oh, moving on. Okay. Well, a woman of many words. I'll go ahead, Janet. I share in those tears. Let me start off with this. I went to 2 town hall meetings. I was only allowed to attend 2 out of 3. The one at Nestor, we had 2 other board members because of the Brown Act, only 2 of us could go. So I went to Mendoza and I went to Central. And I want to share with you that I went over whatever's on the wall there several times online. I saw a lot of input that was the same. The people at Mendoza, I know Mendoza before it was Mendoza. I played in the fields. Okay. I picked the tomatoes. I played on Leon. So I was surprised that the shovel didn't come. It sits there in the office. Okay. As an honor and a reminder that that was your dirt. And so that's what I heard at Mendoza. This is our dirt. Okay. That's what I heard over and over again. Okay. I saw it in writing when I went to Central. The same people from Mendoza came and wrote the same thing. So I had to go back and forth, compare the statements. I know who's in the room. So it was important. Mendoza's dirt was important. Okay. That's what I saw. The program was important. The kids were important. The generations were important. The culture, the family, all was important. And I say that from experience because I've worked Mendoza many times. So I know the community and the student base. So when I went to Central, I heard a concern about, how much is it going to cost? What happened? Why? Well, we asked that question several years ago. And in fact, we asked the representatives here of Imperial Beach to join us at Central to see what was going on. And that was, I think, 2019. And we were all in shock. So that's the question. What happened? Well, what happened is board of trustees and superintendents of the past make projections and plans. I've thought about this a lot. How did this happen? And so looking back 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago when Mendoza was born, these plans were made ahead of time, just like preschool. Was planned, 15, 20 years ago. Okay. And so what we have at our preschool now, our new school, it was reborn in 2020. So those projections, as the superintendent shared, are 5-10 years out. Okay. 5-10 years out. But I wanted to bring attention to the input sessions of a town hall because those are really important. And for me as a board member, we didn't sit around and talk about anything. Violation of the Brown Act. So what I saw and what I heard for myself and what I read and what was shared tonight and my homework, okay, I bring to the table tonight. So through that, I wrote some things down and my homework. In my homework, I went through the enrollment for 2022, 23 years in the school accountability report card. I made 2 grids. Okay, one based on the enrollment of 22, 23 for each school, and then the superintendent's concept and his dream, because I remember him telling me that when I was sitting there at Mendoza and you all were there. He said, close your eyes and try to imagine. I closed my eyes and I imagined. Okay. So thank you, Superintendent, for thinking out of the box, and the information that was brought to the committee. I agree. It doesn't jive. Okay. But we have business partners who are employed for business purpose. And so the business of the district was shared with the committee. Okay. The business of the district is, how do we slow the decline? How do we provide programs? How do we take care of our infrastructure and our students and our families that live here? So, putting that aside, can we message better? Yes. Can we encourage people to go on Dojo? Of course. But that's, every day is something new. Okay. So in that, I want to share that, Central was upset about the conditions. That's what they wrote. That's what they said. And I know that's true. But then the conversation turned to instruction, and it's on the board. Okay. Putting that aside, we're talking about the instruction. The instruction my children get. Okay. They're not happy. Okay. They're not happy. So what do? We have to focus on instruction. Superintendent is looking at his proposed and looking how better to serve our students. What is necessary to be in the next generation employable, and what we need, like environmentalists, biologists, somebody to fix this sewage crisis. We have that 2nd grader in our class. We just have to find them. Okay. And that's what our superintendent's making a dream come true. So Central students, I call it the sweet spot. You might think it's awful, but I shared this with the superintendent. It's sweet because Central students can pick their school of choice. Okay. So Central parents have no idea what Bayside looks like, what Mendoza looks like, what Oneonta looks like. They only know what they see at Central, and it's awful. So the other ideas. Okay, so not previously considered. Well, I went through my little playbook here, and I agree with the superintendent, and it's a long-range plan. But we need to do something about Central. And that's not going to happen this year. It's projected for 25, even beyond, perhaps, maybe, but definitely in 25. And so those students would be given the opportunity to go to any school of their choice. And the committee didn't consider programs. They considered facilities. And so I'm talking with the superintendent. I said, wait a minute, I thought we were talking facility, not programs. And so I says, okay, shift gear. Okay. So I shifted gears and said, how, can this work? Yes, it can work. Okay. Kelly, you were right. Giving more options for 7th and 8th grade programming in our schools. If we're going to look at the superintendent's recommended changes to Bayside and Oneonta being K through 3, and then the 4 through 6, and expanding and building out our capacity at Oneonta set to 7th and 8th in that program, that will keep those students there at their home schools and away from a charter. So we keep those children. Okay. Nestor needs to stay where Nestor is. And I'm just going to put it right up front. The enrollment is too much. It's a hazard. I've shared that with the superintendent. I've worked at Nestor. It's built for a 500 to 600 capacity. We got class size reduction. We got the trailers from the neighbor went away. Now they're over capacity. They can't hire 2 teachers, resource teachers that those students need because they do not have the facility to put them in a closet that work with students. That's a shame. Okay, so they need to draw that enrollment down. I'm not open to moving them to Berry. I am very open to Berry expanding on their VAPA program. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. The teachers have done it. Oh my gosh. It'll make you cry, Janet. I am fully supporting Mendoza. Fully supporting Mendoza. That is our baby school besides our VIP. Okay. To leave that to a charter would be a sin. So I am not open to that. I'm sorry, Nestor, but not sorry. My vision, superintendent, for Mendoza would to build out capacity 4 through 8. To include Berry as a feeder school, K through 3. So as our children, Berry's all set up for a feeder school for Mendoza. It's already set. Okay, we just have to expand on it. The music program, instrumental music, that's a factor for Mendoza. Okay, when I worked there, we had music, we had office, and we had VIP, VPA, telephones. They had their own telephone numbers. Okay, 3 different programs. Okay, so we can't lose sight of the instrumental music program because it was built for the music program, sound, everything. You just can't go, over here and have a music thing during lunch. Okay, and that's happened. So my proposal 2 here is to expand our instrumental music program to Berry. And so those students that are coming to Mendoza are prepared to go into the musical program, instrumental music program 4 through 8. And that would be my dream about that. And I've dreamt about it like for a month now. I think that the dual immersion program for Nikolov is a wonderful concept, Superintendent. There is a great need for the dual language program, and Nikolov is doing such a good job in their approach to bringing that program along. And Sunny Slope has it hasn't been shared tonight, but Sunny Slope has some structural things that really are going to cost a lot of money. So with that, I think I have spoke about my dreams. And most important thing is that we build out to capacity. I'm open to the superintendents, doing whatever the family wants, let them go to that school. Mendoza can absorb the Central if they choose to go there. Emory can, Bayside can, Berry can, Sunny Slope can. So that's the advisory committee, superintendent advisory committee's preference. And number 1, superintendent advisory committee, item 1, Nestor to Mendoza. No. Okay, so I hope I have. Anybody has any questions about bond money, please call the superintendent. He'll be happy to share with you or direct you in the direction that you need to. And please sign up to be on the bond oversight committee. We need your help. Again, we didn't discuss programs in the committee. We didn't programs here for the input. So I'm really hoping that the trustees would support more, consider the superintendent's rebuilding concept with the added imagination that I've just shared, and Kelly and Jose, and we're waiting for Janet, and come back with a plan, certainly a plan for the next 5 years. So I'm going to mark mine right here. Consider superintendent rebuilding concept with other ideas. I have Quinones, Egrino, like her. And now we're still waiting for Mendina. And we need to also say yes to the central school. Go ahead.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I think that the committee has all, thank you, sorry. I think the committee has all kinds of new information and ideas and possibilities, and I would love to see these new ideas go back to the committee and then back to us.
That's perfect because their task was not programs. And so it was facility closure.
Right. So I think,
Yes, you're
this
right.
is exciting. I think this
So-
should be exciting. And I just think it should go back to the committee. And then I would love to hear ideas of what they think with the new concept in consideration. for
Yeah.
consideration.
And I can share that that is the process that's going to happen. And in fact, my last meeting with the committee, I did let them know that there would be a really good chance that they would come back together and discuss whatever direction we had, given that we had other ideas from the community. So then obviously the committee has to look at that.
And I'm also concerned about Sunny Slope and Berry. They weren't in the conversation. And so with your draft concept, they weren't in the conversation, Superintendent.
Both Sunny Slope and Barry, I believe, were part of the committee, but they weren't in the, nobody was really in this concept conversation. So that's why the committee is going to look at that again.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, so we have 3 for the consideration of superintendent rebuilding concept with other ideas for programming. We got 3 and we're still waiting for Medina. And am I right into number 7, proceed with central and the superintendent rebuilding concept and other ideas? No, one more time, go ahead. Go ahead.
6 would take it back to the committee.
Okay, so 6 would take it back to the committee.
So if I
Reconsider
can
all
clarify
options.
something, I'm sorry. Whatever options and directions you proceed with, the committee will revisit those options, even though it's not explicit in every option there. If it's considered the superintendent's rebuilding concept, we will come back to the committee. For this SAC to reconsider all options, you're asking us to revisit all the previous options and the new concept. With number 7, you're asking only to since one of the recommendations was to proceed with central as far as a closure, it would be to move forward with that and continue to explore the concept of the superintendent's concept. The reason number 7 only shows central is because if you want to consider the superintendent's concept, you can't proceed with a Mendoza move or a Nestor move because then the concept won't work. So it does work if you proceed with central though. So I just want to clarify those to kind of for some clarity.
Thank you.
So am I right on number 7?
And then, but that when they proceed with central and the superintendent's rebuilding concept, that also leaves room for them to come up with their own ideas as well, based on the things that they've heard.
The committee.
Right. Yes.
Yes, we would come back with these
Thank you.
ideas and then the discussion would continue around, does it work? Does it not work? What if we try it this way? We still have a lot of data to present based off your direction, if that is it. Because we want to present, just like you saw the data of enrollment, what the impact is on transportation or boundaries or students. We have to look into all of that if that's how you want us to proceed.
Thank you.
So at this time, we really need the board, each board member to just kind of give us their direction out of the options that we have there. So right.
We're just waiting for Medina. Yeah.
My apologies, I can't hold getting emotional here. Like I always share with superintendent, we need to start thinking about outside the box. Student center, family center. And I like your idea and I will go with that one.
You're a yes for consideration of the superintendent rebuilding concept and ideas? Yes. And proceed with central and the superintendent rebuilding concept and ideas? Yes. Okay, I think we have our consensus. We're good? We're good? Okay.
Okay.
Sign and date this?
If I can just make sure we're clear with the consensus.
I just would like to add one more thing. I don't know if we could add more parents to the committee to have more parent input. I would love that if the rest of the board would support me on that.
And like I've shared before, getting parents to participate in the committee, and there are probably a lot of different reasons why. But I know that was very challenging. Initially, when we first got the committee back, we didn't have any parents on it. And that's when Assistant Superintendent Laura and I had a conversation around that. And we went back out to try to get additional parents. And I think at that point was when principals were reaching out to people specifically. Again, a lot of reasons for that. But yes, we understand that that's a huge need. And I want the board to know that we are aware of that. We have worked on that, but it has been a challenge.
Is it possible to be shared on Class Dojo since that's what most parents use?
I think one of the things that we're going to have to do is really go out specifically to recruit parents. We're going to have to make personal phone calls. We're going to have to make personal contact with parents, not Dojo, not email, not website, personal contacts.
I like that idea. Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely support adding more parents to the committee. Also, if there's room for like an additional town hall, maybe like some sort of district-wide town hall here in this building with a mariachi performance, all that. Can I get a second?
I will second that if we could do it in Spanish. We have a lot of families who are Spanish speakers, so I think we need that. If we could have a Spanish town hall for our parents.
The original plan was to have a town hall in Spanish only, but because the first 3 town halls with the translation that was being provided seemed to work pretty well, then we didn't do that additional Spanish only town hall. There is a conversation around looking to do additional community input. So once it goes to the committee, and they have an opportunity to discuss the options or this new concept, or it's not, it's just a concept, then we are also going to share it with the greater community and get additional input. Our goal is to be very transparent and to make sure that the community has an opportunity to give input. One of the things that we've talked about or we're considering is doing a survey. We are really looking at how can we get the most input, understanding that, we're not going to make everybody happy, but the idea is that everybody had an opportunity to give input and that everybody understands the why and the direction we're going.
Thank you, Superintendent. And it draws me back to our mission, vision, and values, where it says South Bay Union School District in partnership with our community. That means all of us together. And thank you for coming tonight, community. City leaders, you're important. Our decisions we make here impact our city here in 3 zip codes, actually, 3 zip codes. So thank you for coming. And we'll work on to the next step, Superintendent.
Okay. And then just to clarify, so the direction from the board now is to consider the rebuilding concept.
Yep.
Yes? Okay, perfect. I heard a lot tonight about the fact that schools consider themselves a family. I can't agree any more with that. As a superintendent, I consider our district a family. When families have challenges, they come together and accomplish or make the tough choices so that the whole family is able to function at in a better place. That's what I'm hoping that our community does, is that they do come together as a family and understand that it's not going to be easy for anybody. But I would argue that what we're doing right now is having an impact on our students. We're not producing really great results with our students right now. If we look at our academic data, it's not there. So we have an opportunity to do something that's out of the box, that's going to help us meet the needs of our students. But again, and you know, Trustee Quiñones, you heard me say this at a couple of meetings. Yes, it is going to be difficult. This is a difficult choice that nobody wants to make. But I'm asking for us to push beyond that and to look at the opportunity we have to redefine our district, to create a district that truly meets the needs of all our students and that our staff are happy to come to work every day. So thank you very much. And with that, good night.
Thank you, trustees, superintendent, staff, and public. Any final comments from the trustees? Well, I thank you all for our study session here and the work behind presentation tonight. It was deep. And with that, we'll adjourn our meeting. What is it, 6:55?